Now the Philistines gathered their armies for battle, and they were gathered at Sakkah, which belongs to Judah, and encamped between Sakkah and Azekah in Ephsdammim. And Saul and the men of Israel were gathered and encamped in the valley of Elah, and drew up in line of battle against the Philistines. And the Philistines stood on the mountain on the one side, and Israel stood on the mountain on the other side, with a valley between them. And there came out from the camp of the Philistines a champion named Goliath of Gath, whose height was over 9 feet tall. He had a helmet of bronze on his head, and he was armed with a coat of mail, and the weight of the coat was 5,000 shekels of bronze. And he had bronze armor on his legs, and a javelin of bronze slung between his shoulders. The shaft of his spear was like a weaver's beam, and his spear's head weighed 600 shekels of iron. And his shield-bearer went before him. He stood and shouted to the ranks of Israel,
Fee, fi, fo, fum. I smell the blood of Israelites. Why have you come for battle? Am I not a Philistine, and you Israelites? Let one of your men come and fight me. If he fights and kills me, then we shall be your servants. But if I prevail and kill him, then you shall be our servants, and you shall serve us.
And the Israelites dismayed and trembled with fear. Now David was the son of an Ephrathite of Bethlehem in Judah named Jesse, who had 8 sons. In the days of Saul, the man was already old and advanced in years. The 3 oldest sons of Jesse had followed Saul to battle, and the names of the 3 sons who went to battle were Eliab the firstborn, and next to him Abinadab, and the third Shema. David was the youngest. The 3 eldest followed Saul, but David went back and forth from Saul to feed his father's sheep at Bethlehem. For 40 days the Philistine came forward and took his stand, morning and evening. Hi, Dad.
Take this bread to your brothers, and bring the cheese to their commander. See if your brothers are well, and bring word back from them.
Bye. Now Saul and they and all the men of Israel were in the valley of Elah fighting with the Philistines. And David rose early in the morning and left the sheep with a keeper, and took the provisions and went, as Jesse had commanded him. And he came to the encampment as the host was going out to the battle line, shouting the war cry. Israel and the Philistines drew up for battle, army against army. And David let the things in charge of the keeper of the baggage, and ran to the ranks and went and greeted his brothers. As he talked with them, behold, the champion of Philistine of Gath, Goliath by name, came up out of the ranks of the Philistines, and spoke the same words as before. And David heard him. All the men of Israel, when they saw the man, fled from him and were much afraid.
Oh no! This big Goliath is super scary! Have you seen him?
Surely he has come to defy Israel. The king will enrich the man who kills him with great riches, and give him the king's own daughter, and make his father's house free in Israel. What should be done for the person who kills this Philistine and takes the shame away from Israel? Who is this Philistine that he should defy the armies of the living God? And the people answered him in the same way as before. Now Eliab, his eldest brother, heard when he spoke to the men, and Eliab's anger was kindled against David.
Why have you come? And who have you left your sheep with? I know your presumption and the evil of your heart. You have come to watch the battle.
What have I done now? Was it not just a word? And David turned away and asked the people the same thing, and he was answered in the same way. When the words that David spoke were heard, they repeated them before Saul, and he sent for David. Let no man's heart fail him. Your servant will go and fight the Philistine.
You are too young. You can't fight him. He's been a man of war since his youth.
I used to keep sheep for my father. When a lion or a bear came and took a lamb from the flock, I went and struck it down and brought the lamb back. If he rose up against me, I took him and killed him. Your servant had killed lions and bears, and this Philistine will be like one of them. The Lord who delivered me from the bears and lions will deliver me from this too.
Go, and may the Lord be with you.
Then Saul gave David his shield and the sword on his back, and David tried in vain to go, for he had not tested these weapons. I can't use these. They won't work." So he took them off and he left them. And David took his sling and 5 smooth stones from the brook. He took his sling in his hand and approached Goliath. And the Philistine moved forward and came near to David with his shield-bearer in front of him. And when the Philistine looked and saw David, he disdained him, for he was but a youth, ruddy and handsome in appearance.
Am I a dog that you come to me with sticks? Come to me, and I will feed your flesh to the birds of the air and the beasts of the field.
You come to me with a sword and a spear and a javelin, but I come to you in the name of the Lord of hosts, the gods of the armies of Israel, who you have defied. And I will strike you down and cut off your head, and I will give the dead bodies of the Philistines to the beasts so that you can know that our Lord rules all. When the Philistine arose and came and drew near to meet David, David ran quickly toward the battle line to meet the Philistine. And David put his hand in his bag and took out a stone and slung it and struck the Philistine on his forehead. The stone sank into his forehead and he fell on his face to the ground. So David prevailed over the Philistine with a sling and a stone, and struck the Philistine and killed him. There was no sword in the hand of David. Then David ran and stood over the Philistine, and took his sword, and drew it out of its sheath, killed him, and cut off his head with it. When the Philistines saw that their champion was dead, they fled. And the men of Israel and Judah rose with a shout and pursued the Philistines as far as Gath and the gates of Ekron, so that the wounded Philistines fell on the way from Shaaraim as far as Gath and Ekron. And the people of Israel came back from chasing the Philistines, and they plundered their camp. And David took the head of the Philistine and brought it to Jerusalem, but he put his armor in his tent. As soon as Saul saw David go out against the Philistine, he said to Abner, the commander of the army,
Abner, who is that kid?
I don't actually know. I thought I knew everyone in Israel.
Well, then go and figure it out.
And as soon as David returned from striking down the Philistine, Abner took him and brought him before Saul with the head of the Philistine in his hand.
Who's your daddy, kid?
I am the son of Jesse the Bethlehemite.
Your future looks bright, kid.
Your sword's stuck. How am I supposed to cut your head off, dude? Really? Alright, why do you guys think you should be Goliath? Well, I am bigger than most Playmobil characters, and obviously I look awesome. Oh, okay. Why do you think you should be Goliath? Because I am Goliath. You? Well, I've always wanted a career in acting, and this seems like a perfect way to get me started. You see, I'm the perfect size, and despite my clothes being painted on, so are yours. So, I don't know why they paint on our clothes, but, okay. I think I've heard enough. Why should you be Goliath? Because I'm really, really tall. Okay, then, let's see.
Thank you all for coming.
Thank you all for coming. We'll get the results back in just a few minutes. After a long day of work, I finally get to go back and rest. Seriously, that is so hard. Do you know how hard it is to film a movie where all you do is stand holding a shield above your head for ages? So hard. There's a giant! Seriously? It's probably just Goliath. There's another giant! Is it one of Goliath's friends? I don't know! Probably! Well, at least he shut up. Does he need medical attention? I wasn't trained in first aid. What do they expect from me? We'll just leave him here. Okay, bye. This movie theater is so confusing. Seriously, can't they just, I don't know, put up signs or something? Oh, could you tell me where I am? Hello? 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 Should I take him to the hospital?